A father and his teenage stepdaughter set out on a quiet weekend sailing trip, but they never came back. No wreckage, no bodies, just an empty boat drifting off the California coast. For 10 years, the mother believed they drowned. She held memorials, lit candles, slept beside an untouched pillow every night. But in 2022, a blurry vacation video surfaced online, revealing the unthinkable. They were alive and living together under new names in a foreign country as lovers. What happened next would shake the courtroom and redefine betrayal forever. The morning of August 12th, 2012, started like any other summer Saturday in San Diego, warm, breezy, and quiet in the marina just off Harbor Island. Lorraine Mitchell stood barefoot on her porch with a cup of lukewarm coffee in one hand and a folded towel in the other. Her husband, Raymond Cole, was loading their small 22-foot sailboat with bottled water and a cooler of sandwiches. Their 16-year-old daughter, Jasmine, sat cross-legged near the bow, hood up, earbuds in, eyes on the water. They were headed out for one of their routine weekend sails. Just the two of them, something they've been doing more frequently over the past year. Raymond looked up at Lorraine and gave her a half-smile, the kind that barely touched his eyes but had become his signature. "We'll be back Sunday evening," he said, adjusting the rope. Lorraine stepped down the porch stairs and kissed Jasmine's forehead. "Don't forget sunscreen this time," she joked. Jasmine gave a small nod without removing her earbuds. By 7:10 a.m., the boat pulled away from the dock and disappeared behind the curve of the inlet, the sunlight bouncing off the water like a promise. Lorraine didn't know it then, but that was the last time she would see either of them alive. By Sunday evening, when no headlights pulled into the driveway, she didn't panic. Not yet. Raymond had sailed for most of his adult life. He was calm, methodical, careful. He didn't take chances. And Jasmine was a strong swimmer who wore her life vest religiously. She reheated the pot, roast anyway, just in case they came in late. But by Monday morning, with no word, no call, no message, Lorraine picked up the phone and contacted the U.S. Coast Guard. At 6:12 a.m., a private fishing charter had reported a boat drifting 14 miles off the coast, engine idling. It was Raymond's. The cooler was still full. The emergency radio untouched. 2 life jackets missing. No signs of struggle. No distress signal. Just silence. No blood. No bodies. Just absence. In the following days, the story made the local news. Decorated Navy veteran and stepdaughter lost at sea. Boat found, but family still missing. Volunteers combed the coastline. Divers scanned the seafloor. Helicopters hovered until fuel ran low. Nothing turned up. By the end of the second week, the search was called off. Raymond Cole and Jasmine Mitchell were presumed dead, lost to the Pacific Ocean like so many others. But Lorraine never believed the water took them. Not completely. Not like that. Before the ocean took her family, or at least that's what Lorraine used to believe, there was a time when life was quiet. Not perfect, not exciting, just quiet. And for a woman who had buried a husband in her 30s while raising a 5-year-old daughter alone, quiet had started to feel like a kind of blessing. Lorraine Mitchell met Raymond Cole on a Sunday morning in 2002 in the back pew of First Missionary Baptist Church in San Diego. He sat alone, dressed in a pressed white shirt, the kind of man who looked like he was used to standing at attention even when seated. After the sermon, he stayed for coffee and politely declined the cookies. He wasn't charming. He wasn't smooth, but he was present. Lorraine remembered the first thing he ever said to her. "Your daughter listens well. Most kids don't sit still like that." That was all. Just a quiet observation about Jasmine, who had been quietly drawing in a notebook next to her mother. Raymond wasn't from San Diego. He'd retired from the U.S. Navy after 20 years of service and settled into a modest life working part-time at a marina repairing boat motors. He lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, never went out drinking, never missed Sunday service. He didn't talk about his past much, only mentioned, once, that he had lost a wife to cancer back in '95. Her name was Denise. No kids. Just us two, he said, like it was a line he'd practiced 100 times. Lorraine wasn't looking for love. Not really. She had dated here and there, always cautiously, always with Jasmine in mind. But Raymond was different. He didn't push. He didn't press. He showed up with small gestures, a ride home from Bible study, a fixed leaky pipe, a tin of tea she once mentioned liking. It wasn't romance. It was reliability. And for Lorraine, that felt safer. When he first met Jasmine, she was standoffish, like any kid unsure of a new adult in the house. But Raymond never tried to force the bond. He helped with her science project. He taught her how to fish off the dock. He kept his distance until she closed it herself. And slowly she did. They married on a humid afternoon in June 2005 in the church where they met. Lorraine wore a simple ivory dress. Jasmine stood beside her, holding a bouquet nearly as big as her arms. Raymond's vows were short but heartfelt. He promised to protect them, to show up, to never leave. And for a while, he kept that promise. Raymond never raised his voice, never stayed out late. He brought home groceries without being asked, repaired things before they broke, and remembered birthdays without needing reminders. Jasmine began to call him Dad after about a year. Not because anyone asked her to, just because one day at dinner, she did. Lorraine remembered the way Raymond nodded in response. No big moment, no swelling music, just a quiet thank you and a pass of the mashed potatoes. That was how things were with him. Nothing dramatic, just dependable. By 2007, they had a rhythm. Family dinners, church on Sundays, weekend walks by the marina. Jasmine blossomed under the steady presence of a man who never shouted, never left. Lorraine thought she had finally found peace. Not passion, not sparks, just peace. But peace, as she would learn, can be deceiving. Because underneath Raymond's steady hands and quiet smile was a silence too deep to hear. And in time, it would swallow them all. Looking back, Lorraine Mitchell could recall 100 little things, small, ordinary details that didn't mean much at the time, but once stitched together, formed a thread that unraveled everything. It started with the silence. Not the kind that comes from comfort, but the kind that presses in when no one wants to name what's wrong. Jasmine had always been a quiet girl, bookish and a little shy. But sometime around her 14th birthday, something shifted. She stopped going to youth group on Wednesday nights. She no longer invited friends over for sleepovers. Her laughter, once loud and contagious, became reserved, measured. Lorraine asked her once if everything was okay. Jasmine shrugged. Just tired, that's all. It sounded believable. Teenagers go through moods. Boundaries shift. Hormones wreak havoc. Lorraine chalked it up to growing pains. What else could it be? Around that same time, Raymond started taking Jasmine out sailing more often. At first, it was once a month, then once a week, then some weeks twice. He called it their thing, just father and daughter bonding. Lorraine found it sweet. After all, Jasmine had never known her biological father. Maybe this was what she needed. And every time they came home, Jasmine seemed calmer. Tired but settled. Focused. She'd go straight to her room, sometimes humming softly under her breath. Still, there were moments Lorraine couldn't quite explain. Like the day she opened the coat closet and found a second backpack. Not the one Jasmine used for school, but a rugged, waterproof model, tucked behind a stack of scarves. When she asked about it, Raymond didn't hesitate. Old gear from a buddy who visited a while back. Left it behind. Lorraine believed him. Raymond didn't lie. He never had a reason to. But that night, she didn't sleep well. A few weeks later, while dusting Jasmine's bookshelf, Lorraine noticed a small blue journal wedged between two books. It wasn't hidden, but it wasn't exactly out in the open either. Curiosity got the better of her. She opened it. There was only one line on the first page. The sea feels safer than land. Not poetic, not dramatic, just true. At least, it read like a truth. Lorraine stared at it for a long time. She didn't read the rest. She slid it back exactly where she found it. But the sentence haunted her. What did her daughter mean? When she brought it up to Raymond over dinner that night, he didn't flinch. "She's sensitive," he said calmly, spooning peas onto his plate. "The water probably helps her disconnect from all the noise. Better than being glued to a screen all day like most kids." Lorraine nodded slowly. She wanted to believe that. She needed to, but little things kept piling up. Jasmine started locking her bedroom door. She asked for boat shoes and marine binoculars for Christmas. She spent hours sketching sailboats in her notebooks. And when Lorraine offered to join them on one of their weekend trips, Jasmine's response came too fast. "I've got a lot of homework. Maybe next time." Raymond added gently, "Let her have this. It's their rhythm." So Lorraine let them go again and again, watching her daughter sail off into the horizon with a man she trusted most in the world. And with every trip, Jasmine seemed to pull just a little further away. The warmth didn't vanish overnight. It dimmed gradually, like a light bulb slowly dying out. Lorraine would reach in for a hug, and Jasmine's arms would delay in wrapping back. Simple questions. How was school? "You hungry?" were answered in clipped phrases. She was still polite, still respectful, but different, like something inside her had shifted and no one had been invited in to witness it. Lorraine kept waiting for the moment she'd snap back. That Jasmine would laugh again like she used to. That she'd storm out of the bathroom, yelling about flat irons and dresses and boys. But that moment never came. Instead, one Sunday afternoon, Lorraine stood in the hallway folding laundry when she saw it. Jasmine had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up under the same fleece blanket she'd had since childhood. Raymond was sitting nearby, reading a boating magazine. At first, it looked like any other domestic scene. Normal, quiet, until Jasmine stirred and rolled over, placing her head against Raymond's thigh. Too familiar, too intimate. And when Raymond reached down to adjust the blanket over her shoulders, his hand lingered just a second too long. Lorraine blinked and looked away. She told herself it was fatherly, that she was being paranoid. But deep inside, something cold had already begun to settle in her gut. And 10 years later, when the boat returned without them, when the ocean gave back silence and not bodies, Lorraine remembered that exact moment. The blanket, the way Jasmine nestled in, the way Raymond didn't flinch. Grief is supposed to have stages. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. That's what the books say. What counselors repeat. What pastors whisper from pulpits. But Lorraine Mitchell didn't grieve in stages. She grieved in circles. Each morning, she woke up and circled back to the same question. Were they? And each night, she lit a candle on the kitchen table and circled back to the same answer. Gone, but not gone. The world around her moved on quickly after the Coast Guard ended the search. Presumed lost at sea. That was the phrase printed in the local paper. Her neighbors brought over casseroles. Church ladies left flowers. Jasmine's school held a candlelight vigil on the front lawn and placed a plaque under a newly planted tree. But Lorraine? Lorraine just sat in her living room, watching the door, watching the driveway, listening for something, anything that never came. She didn't eat much, didn't sleep. She walked the beaches alone for months, scanning the shoreline like it might give her back what it took. No funerals, no bodies, no closure, just a boat, just questions. She filed the death declarations herself 10 months later, signed the papers in front of a judge with a steady hand and dry eyes. Back home, She packed Raymond's clothes into boxes, but left his boots by the door. She changed Jasmine's sheets, but never touched the stuffed bear on her pillow. The house became a shrine, not out of hope, but out of paralysis, because to change anything felt like betrayal. The insurance company refused to pay out the life policies. Too much uncertainty. Unresolved disappearance was the term they used. She appealed, hired a lawyer, waited. Nothing moved. Within 2 years, the mortgage fell behind. Lorraine sold her car, took on a second job cleaning offices at night just to keep the lights on. People told her to let go. They wouldn't want you to live like this, a neighbor said. Maybe they're at peace now, her pastor offered. But Lorraine didn't want peace. She wanted truth. Year 4, she received a letter from one of Jasmine's classmates. The handwriting was careful, the words tiptoeing around something raw. We never knew how to say it, but we always thought it was strange how she looked at him, like he was the only person who existed. It didn't feel like a dad thing, but we told ourselves we were being dramatic. I'm sorry we didn't say anything sooner. Lorraine folded the letter, then folded it again, and tucked it into the back of a kitchen drawer. She never responded. What was there to say? You saw it too? And still, no one said a damn thing. By year 6, the world had forgotten. The plaque at the school grew weathered. The tree stopped blooming. The neighbors stopped dropping by. But every August 12th, Lorraine lit a single candle and placed it in the front window. No words, no guests, just the soft flicker of flame against glass. Her way of saying, I remember, and the bedroom remained untouched. The razor by the sink, the watch on the nightstand, the faint smell of Jasmine's vanilla shampoo, still clinging to the air on humid days. It wasn't denial. Not really. Lorraine wasn't waiting for them to come back. She was waiting to understand why they hadn't. When she walked by the marina, the same one they launched from that last morning, her stomach twisted, not from sadness, but from a gnawing ache that never left. Because something about the way they vanished never sat right. There were no storms in the forecast, no emergency beacon activated, no distress call. The boat came back without a scratch, stocked with food, life jackets missing, as if someone had tidied it up before walking away. Lorraine had said it once in passing to her therapist, and never again. It didn't feel like an accident. It felt like a decision. But what kind of man decides to disappear with his teenage stepdaughter? What kind of daughter leaves her mother to bury ghosts? 10 years is a long time to live in silence. Long enough for doubt to rot into something darker. Long enough for questions to calcify into rage. Long enough for the world to assume you're better now, just because you still show up for work and don't cry in the grocery store. But Lorraine wasn't better. She was empty. And then, on a quiet Saturday in May, her phone buzzed. A message from an old friend. No subject line. Just a short video clip from a street festival in Ecuador. She almost didn't open it. But when she did, the world she had carefully kept from collapsing finally shattered. It was supposed to be nothing. Just a short, grainy video from a street festival in some coastal town in Ecuador. Lorraine Mitchell hadn't even spoken to Sandra Logan in over a year, an old college friend, now a travel blogger with a habit of forwarding clips she thought were colorful or fun. The message came without context. This festival is wild. You'd love it here. No emojis. No explanation. Just a 26-second video. Lorraine almost didn't tap play, but she did. The screen lit up with warm, oversaturated colors, streamers strung between palm trees, kids chasing bubbles, men beating drums with palms full of sweat and rhythm. The camera shook slightly, pivoting left, then right, and then Lorraine's breath caught. There, in the corner of the screen, a man and a woman, dancing, nothing grand, just swaying together, slowly. Casual, familiar. The man had gray in his beard now, broad shoulders, a baseball cap worn backwards. The kind of small details no one else would notice, but Lorraine did. She froze the frame, zoomed in, and there he was. Raymond. Not maybe, not possibly. Raymond. Alive. The woman beside him was harder to recognize at first. Older now, fuller face, hair dyed darker, pulled into a knot. But when she laughed, tilting her head to the right the same way she did as a child, Lorraine's knees went weak. Jasmine. Her baby. Her daughter. Lorraine didn't scream, didn't drop the phone, didn't call anyone. She just watched the video again, and again, and again, until every pixel burned behind her eyelids like truth too sharp to swallow. They hadn't drowned. They hadn't been taken. They had left. Together. And that was the moment something inside Lorraine broke, cleanly, silently, like glass under pressure for too long. 10 years of mourning, of candles and vigils, of unanswered prayers and folded laundry left untouched, erased in 26 seconds. Not grief, not loss, not death. Choice. She spent that night sitting at her kitchen table, phone screen glowing in the dark. No lights, no movement, just her and the video. At 2:13 a.m., she took a screenshot, then another, then zoomed in until the faces blurred beyond recognition. But it didn't matter. It was them. She didn't need facial recognition software. She didn't need DNA. She knew the way her daughter moved. She knew the shape of her husband's silence. By morning, Lorraine had made her decision. Not a rage-fueled impulse. Not a breakdown. Something colder. Clearer. She booked a one-way flight to Ecuador. Didn't tell her cousin. Didn't call her pastor. She packed light. 2 changes of clothes, a small notebook, her passport, and a printed screenshot of the video. And just before locking the door behind her, she did something she hadn't done in a decade. She turned off the porch light. Lorraine Mitchell arrived in Ecuador on a Tuesday afternoon, under a sky too blue for what she was about to do. The airport was loud, crowded, full of families in sandals and straw hats, dragging sun-faded luggage behind them. But Lorraine moved through it like a ghost. No selfies, no sightseeing, just a folded piece of paper in her wallet, a still image pulled from a 26-second lie. She didn't check into a resort. She found a rundown motel near the edge of town. Cracked tiles, a ceiling fan that groaned more than it spun, a window that stuck halfway open. She paid in cash and used a fake name. When the clerk asked how long she'd stay, she said, just long enough. She didn't have an address. Just the images burned into her mind from that video. Red paper lanterns, blue shutters, chipped pink graffiti. Details that meant nothing to anyone else but had become coordinates to her. For 2 days, Lorraine walked the winding streets like a woman following a map only she could see. On the 3rd day, she found it. A modest yellow house with a leaning wooden gate. 2 hammocks on the porch. A tin mailbox with no name. And inside, behind the slatted windows, she saw them. He went by Miguel now. She went by Rosa. But they were still Raymond and Jasmine, even if the locals had no idea. Everyone in the neighborhood spoke kindly of them. They're quiet, polite. They don't bother anyone. Always together. Lorraine wanted to scream. Of course they were always together. They'd been together since the day they disappeared. She watched them from a distance. Every day, Raymond, Miguel, fixed boats for cash, the same way he used to back in San Diego. He still wore his cap backward, still moved like a man who thought before he stepped. Jasmine, Rosa, taught English to local school kids behind a beachside cafe. She laughed easily. She spoke with confidence. But Lorraine noticed something underneath it. A tension behind the smile. A glance over the shoulder. A rhythm that wasn't joy. It was choreography. And always, she looked at him before she laughed, as if waiting for permission to be happy. Lorraine filled a notebook. Every step they took. Every store they visited. What time they left. what time they returned. The way they held hands in public like nothing about them was broken. She watched Raymond place his hand on Jasmine's lower back when they crossed the street. Watched Jasmine rest her head on his shoulder at the beach. Watched her kiss his cheek and hand him coffee like a woman, not a daughter. And on the fourth morning, Lorraine watched them walk barefoot into the surf. The way Raymond took Jasmine's hand wasn't gentle. It was possessive. That's when Lorraine stopped calling her my daughter in her head, because daughters don't wear rings for their fathers. Lorraine didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just sat in her motel room that night, lights off, fans spinning uselessly, and wrote a single sentence on a piece of paper. They weren't taken from me. They chose each other. She folded it, slid it under the water pitcher on the bedside table, picked up her notebook, closed it, stared at the ceiling. For 10 years, she had mourned them. Now she knew they were never dead, just hiding. May 30th, 2022, a Wednesday evening. The kind of quiet where the heat hangs low and the world slows down. Lorraine Mitchell had been waiting for almost an hour. She stood across the narrow street from the yellow house, pressed against a sun-faded wall, her hand inside the canvas tote bag that never left her side. Inside that bag was a pistol, wrapped in cloth, still smelling faintly of the oil used to clean it the night before. She hadn't brought it for protection. She brought it for closure. At 7:43 p.m., the door to the house opened. Raymond stepped out first, followed closely by Jasmine. He was carrying a bag of groceries, some fruit, a loaf of bread. She wore a cotton dress, sandals, her hair tied back in a simple bun. She looked happy, not wildly joyful, just content, like someone who believed the hardest parts of life were behind her. They laughed at something he said, and Lorraine felt her hand tighten on the grip of the gun through the bag. When Jasmine saw her, she stopped mid-step. The grocery bag in her hand swung slightly. Her lips parted, but no words came. Raymond followed her gaze, and when he saw Lorraine, his face shifted, not to shock, but to disbelief, like she was a ghost that hadn't stayed dead. For 5 seconds, none of them moved. Then Lorraine stepped off the curb and into the street. She stopped 6 feet away. Her voice, when it came, was low and steady. "So it's true," she said. "You didn't drown. You didn't die. You just left." Raymond opened his mouth to speak, but she cut him off with a sharp glance. Jasmine whispered, "Mom," her voice trembled. Lorraine turned to her. "You let me mourn you," she said. "You let me bury you both, without coffins, without graves. You let me light candles for ghosts while you were out here, dancing." Raymond stepped forward, palms slightly raised. "Lorraine, please. We didn't mean." "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't you dare explain this to me." She looked at Jasmine again. "You were 16, she said, voice tight, "and he was 52. Don't you rewrite this. Don't you protect him now. You don't owe him that." Jasmine's eyes welled with tears. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it?" Lorraine snapped. "Tell me, what do you call it when your daughter becomes your replacement?" The silence was suffocating. Lorraine's hand slipped inside the tote bag. She pulled the pistol free. The entire street froze. Children nearby stopped kicking a ball. A woman on a balcony dropped her glass. The clatter echoed like a warning. Lorraine didn't raise the gun. Not yet. She just held it loosely at her side. "You had peace," she said quietly. "You had each other. You had your new names, your new life, your sunset walks. And I had what? A mattress that still smelled like you. A closet full of her shoes. Candles I lit every August." Her voice cracked, but she didn't blink. "You left me to rot, to sit in that house and wonder if you screamed, if you were afraid. But you weren't. Were you?" Raymond took one step forward. That was all it took. Lorraine lifted the gun. A single shot rang out. Raymond collapsed instantly, body thudding against the cobblestone. Jasmine dropped to her knees, screaming his name. not in fear, but in something far deeper. Grief, panic, a love twisted beyond recognition. No, no, no. Please, she sobbed, cradling his head. Lorraine stepped forward, gun still steady. She looked down at her daughter. Tears filled her eyes, but her hand didn't shake. You already buried me, Jasmine. Then came a second shot. People screamed. Someone ducked behind a bicycle stand. A man shouted for the police. Doors slammed. Windows shut. But Lorraine didn't move. She placed the pistol on the ground gently, like setting down a heavy truth. And then, hands at her sides, she waited. By the time local police arrived, Lorraine was standing perfectly still in the center of the street. The bodies of the two people she had once called family lay at her feet. She didn't resist, didn't argue, didn't speak. When they asked her name, she said, Lorraine Marie Mitchell. I'm the mother. And for the first time in 10 years, someone wrote her name down, not as a widow, not as a victim, but as the woman who ended the silence. September 12th, 2022. San Diego County Courthouse. Lorraine Marie Mitchell stepped into the courtroom in a light gray jumpsuit and chains around her ankles. Her posture was upright, her expression unreadable. She didn't scan the gallery for familiar faces. She didn't search for sympathy. She had spent 10 years being invisible. Now, for the first time in a decade, the world was finally looking at her. Not as a grieving mother, not as a widow, but as a defendant in a double homicide. The prosecution wasted no time. To them, Lorraine was calculating. She crossed borders, tracked her victims, illegally purchased a firearm, and executed 2 unarmed individuals in broad daylight, the district attorney said. They showed the video surveillance, Lorraine stepping from the shadows, the pistol in her hand. They displayed the receipt for the gun. They read the note she left behind. They weren't taken from me. They chose each other. They called it premeditated, cold, measured, unforgivable. But the defense told a different story. They didn't argue that Lorraine had pulled the trigger. They argued why. This is not a woman consumed by rage, her attorney said. This is a woman worn down by silence. A woman who buried 2 people while they were still breathing in someone else's arms. They brought in a forensic psychiatrist. He didn't describe Lorraine as unstable. He described her as eroded. Year after year, he said, she died a little more. She mourned what she didn't understand. She lived in a house that was never hers again. She lit candles for people who danced without her. This wasn't a snap. This was a slow bleed. Lorraine didn't take the stand, but her written statement was read aloud. I'm not proud of what I did, but I know why I did it. I know what it cost me, and I know what they took, not just from me, but from the girl I raised. She didn't disappear. She became someone else entirely. And I watched it happen from the dark. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. They returned a verdict. Guilty on 2 counts of second-degree murder. Lorraine was sentenced to 30 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20. When the sentence was read, she didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She simply whispered, "Thank you." Not in sarcasm, not in defiance, but in relief. Because the search was finally over. There would be no funeral for Raymond or Jasmine. No embassy came forward to claim their bodies. The yellow house in Ecuador was boarded up, its windows shuttered, curtains still swaying behind glass. Locals lit candles outside the front gate. But no one spoke their names again. Their love, like their lies, died in silence. Back in her prison cell in California, Lorraine picked up a pen. She wrote only one sentence. I mourned them once. I mourned them twice. But never again. She folded the paper, tucked it inside her Bible, and laid down on the thin prison cot. For the first time in 10 years, she slept. This wasn't just a story of disappearance. It was a story of betrayal disguised as tragedy, of a mother erased, a daughter stolen, and a man who mistook control for love. They didn't drown. They weren't lost. They simply chose each other and left one woman to grieve the ghosts they became. But the sea doesn't keep secrets. It only delays them.